Hello everyone, How to Make Games here, and we're back in the C++ Basics project that we created in the introduction/orientation video, and this time we are going to take a look at variables. Now, let me just hop into this new GIMP file in order to show you what a variable is and what happens when you declare one. So let's pretend for a moment that this white space is your computer's RAM. Now the RAM is the memory that can be used in order to store different variables. So let's say I declare myself a variable, and what's gonna happen is that your computer will allocate a chunk of memory, like so, in order to store in a certain value. And the amount of memory that you can, or the amount of variables that you can have depends on how much space is needed for the variable. And the space needed for the variable depends on the type of variable. So, what types of variables are there? Well, first you have int, which stands for integers. And an integer is any whole number. So 3, -7, and whatever. So the best time to declare an integer is when you want to store in a whole number. But what if you want to access decimal values? Then you would use a float, which stands for floating point. This way I can access the decimal places, and I believe it goes up to 6 decimal places. It might be more depending on number of factors, but for all intents and purposes, we're just going to go to 6. Now, why would you want to use an integer versus when you would want to use a float? Well, as I said before, integers are whole numbers, whereas floating points are decimals. But there's another thing. It comes down to an optimization. Let's say this black box represents the amount of memory you need to store an integer. Since floating points have access to decimals, you would require even more memory for that extra bit of decimal spaces. So maybe the memory you would need just a bit longer. So maybe you would have this chunk of memory for integers and this chunk of memory for floats. And then you have a third type of variable known as char, which stands for character. This can store different characters, which are like letters, symbols, even numbers. Now, don't be confused for an integer or character and a character displaying a number. Because what a character does is refers to the ASCII table in order to use a different character value. And I believe there are 200 and some character types that you can store in the character variable. So, here I have my characters and my different variables allocated. Now, when you say int integers equals 0, as I said before, it allocates a chunk of memory, and then it also saves whatever value you have in it. So if this is my integers block of memory, it would save this 0. If my floating point is 0.156, it would come to this chunk of memory and say 0.156. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this for sake of simplicity. And then for my character to store an A, it would just attach an A, chunk of memory would be a bit bigger than that. So there are my three variables. However, as you might note from the name, these variables can be changed whenever you would like them to. And the way you change variables through script is with using the assignment operator, which is the equal sign. Now, in order to show that these variables are changing when using the assignment operator, I'm going to use this cout line in order to see out a variable. So to start, I'm going to see out my integers variable before I change it and after I change it. So right now, if I were to go build and run my program, it just displays 0 twice. However, if I were to set integers equal to 2, build and run, you see 0 and 2. And not only can I assign integers equal to different values, but I can also set it equal to different values themselves. So if I wanted to increase the value of integers by 2, I can say plus equals 2, and that would go from 0 to 2. And this is the same way as saying integers plus 2. And if I were to click build and run, it goes from 0 to 2. So why is it that you can say something like this, but with algebra, you can't say, if you had some sort of algebraic equation such as x equals x plus 6, this doesn't work, but it works in computer science? Well, the reason is this assignment operator calculates the value on the right side and assigns it to what's on the left. So this isn't saying some variable equals a variable plus 2. This is saying the value stored inside of variables plus 2 is being assigned to the integers, the block of memory declared as integers. So let's go back to my block of memory. I have 0, and I'm setting it equal to my integers value, which is 0 plus 2. We calculate 0 plus 2, which is 2, and then we assign it to our integers value, so then this becomes 2. Understand? And you can do the same thing with stuff like multiplication, division. So you can multiply integers, you can divide integers, and you can subtract integers. And you can do the same thing with floating point values as well. But characters are a little bit different. They store in characters, but you don't usually want to do any mathematical operations with them because that wouldn't really make any sense. I have no idea what happened with those cout statements anyway. But what you would normally do is just assign them different character values. So I can set it to equal to b, I can set it equal to whatever. Yeah, those are the three fundamental different variable types. Integers, which store whole numbers. Floating points, which store decimals. And characters, which store characters. However, there are still a few more types of variables that we have to offer. First is bool. which stands for Boolean. Now this stores both either a true or a false value. However, at a memory level, let me just copy and paste this value here. A Boolean variable actually only stores a 0 or a 1, where the 0 value represents false and the 1 represents true. So, because of what Boolean is actually storing, if I set Boolean to false and click build and run, we see that it prints a 0. And if it's true, it'll print a 1. So the reason why you would normally want to use a Boolean instead of just assigning an integer to 0 or 1 is because it's just a little easier to read. So if I had a value that I wanted to make sure was true or false, it would be best to store in a bool, because I can go through the code and see that if you're assigning something true or false, then it must be some sort of conditional flag, versus an integer, it wouldn't be as clear. And if it doesn't really make much sense now, then it most likely will in the next episode, where we go over conditional statements, which range from if, else if, and looping. And this is where we are going to really start manipulating our variables in order to accomplish certain tasks. And then once we have these basics down, we'll be able to start actually making programs. Oh yeah, and there's one more conditional statement known as switch. So yeah, this is going to be the topic of the next episode. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions about variable types, or would like me to address something in the next episode, please let me know. And I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.